It's a cold February morning in Tresckow, Pennsylvania, and Don Smith faces his worst nightmare. After a search for his missing son Justin, he discovers that the 26-year-old has frozen to death in the terrible cold, blue, and unconscious. Desperate, Don calls the emergency services, but can they help? Well, it turns out that a doctor has a last-ditch, but pretty insane, idea that might just save the young man's life. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Less than 12 hours before he was found frozen in the snow, Justin was at the local pub drinking beer with his friends. As he waved goodbye to his loved ones and went out into the frigid night, no one could have guessed what was about to happen. Before Justin knew it, the Arctic temperatures had a deadly grip on him. By the time his father found him the next morning, he was literally frozen solid. In that condition, Justin appeared completely lifeless and without a pulse. While praying for a miracle, Don held his son's body. There was nothing he could do but wait for the emergency services to arrive. Then it was determined by them that nothing could be done for the young man. The coroner was called, but because Justin was so cold, he couldn't be legally pronounced dead. As he started to warm up, something incredible happened, a medical miracle that stunned the whole world. Before that fateful night, Justin was an average 26-year-old living in a small town in Pennsylvania. Justin had responsibilities as he studied psychology at Pennsylvania State University. In his spare time, he enjoyed playing golf and cheering for the Philadelphia Phillies. The evening of February 20, 2015 initially started as many others, and Justin and his friends had gathered in the volunteer fire company's social room to spend the night. Yet there was something special about this day, and it cast a gloomy mood over the group. 10 years earlier, a terrible accident had ruined Justin's life. As a teenager, he had been involved in a car accident that killed his best friend, something he will never forget in his life, and that night, he commemorated the tragedy in his own way. At first, Justin planned to drive back with a friend, but in the end, he decided to leave earlier than planned. Justin didn't feel like waiting and couldn't drive himself anymore because he had already had too much to drink. So he decided to just walk those few miles home. Justin has walked this route before, but on this evening, he was ill-equipped for the freezing cold. Around 9:30 p.m., Justin left his friends, and after he had walked less than 2 kilometers, disaster struck. While it's unclear what exactly happened, doctors believe Justin slipped and hit his head. He lost consciousness, and his body collapsed from the cold. Justin lay on the snowdrift for the rest of the night, his body starting to freeze as the temperature plunged below zero. Meanwhile, his then-girlfriend became increasingly concerned. The search began the next morning. Don, Justin's father, discovered Justin lying on his back in the snowdrift around 7:30 in the morning. His whole body had turned blue and his feet and arms seemed to have just turned black. Though Justin's had his eyes open, there seemed to be no sign of life. Despite this, Don searched desperately for a pulse on his son's frozen body. The emergency services were certain that Justin had died and covered his body with a sheet. Seeking advice on the situation, one of the ambulance brothers contacted Coleman by phone. Fortunately, veteran doctor, Coleman knew that when it came to surviving extreme temperatures, things aren't always what they seem. In fact, he believed that it was possible to resuscitate the young man. According to experts, hypothermia occurs when the temperature of the human body falls below 32 degrees Celsius. Usually this happens because the patient has been exposed to extreme cold. But it can also occur after alcohol consumption. As you can expect, the consequences are not pleasant. When hypothermia occurs, vital organs such as the heart and brain begin to malfunction. Because this process prevents blood flow to the rest of the body, the victim usually goes into shock. This in turn leads to further complications, such as kidney and liver failure. In the United States, an estimated 1,500 people die from hypothermia each year. Although especially old and young people are prone to it, because they usually have the weakest heart muscles, the condition can affect anyone. Coleman knew that hypothermia can save lives, and such a development means that the brain does not need as much oxygen as normal. This gave him a better chance of survival. "You're not dead until you're warm and dead," he claims. Despite Justin's lack of vital signs, Coleman ordered the people at the scene to begin CPR. When the young man arrived at the hospital, the staff couldn't even get an accurate reading of his body temperature. Justin was connected to life support while rescuers continued to resuscitate his lifeless body. Instead of giving up on Justin, the team would fly him to another hospital by helicopter. The doctors were still determined to save Justin's life and didn't give up. When the 26-year-old arrived, he was handed over to James Wu, who specializes in cardiothoracic surgery. ECMO had the best chance of survival for the patient. According to experts, ECMO works by removing and warming the cold blood before it is pumped back into the body. Wu was convinced it could help Justin recover. They decided to connect the young man to the ECMO machine. Nevertheless, Wu remained skeptical of what might happen and gave him a 50-50 chance of recovery. First off, Justin's body was finally starting to warm up. Then his heart started beating, unaided. Justin was far from being out of trouble, and it was concluded that Justin had no brain activity. Justin had another surprise in store, however, because after a few days of treatment and some tests, the results showed that his brain activity was normal. "We were jubilant," admitted the neurologist. "Nevertheless, doctor, Castaldo that Justin could remain in a vegetative state. After all, his brain had been deprived of oxygen for a long time." As the days and weeks passed, Justin's family was constantly by his side. Although his parents were divorced, this tragedy brought the husbands and their daughters, Sarah and Ashley, closer together. Finally, Castaldo saw the sign he was looking for. He noticed that the patient looked at him as he moved. A month after the accident, the young man finally woke up. He had survived. It was a miracle. Although Justin regained consciousness, the road to recovery was long. In the 3 months that followed, Justin focused on his recovery. He moved to the rehabilitation clinic and began to return to his old self. After a while, he even learned how to play golf again, and he also continued his studies through online learning. A year later, Justin returned to the hospital to thank the people who had given him his life back. Meanwhile, Coleman believes he has learned a valuable lesson from his patient's miraculous recovery. "This case has taught me that sometimes you have to go by your gut feeling." Nevertheless, Justin's story should serve as a warning to those living in colder climates. If it's bitterly cold outside, always pack well and don't take any chances.